Season 1 of Andor has already ended, and it felt like it flashed right by us. Its final episode, called Bix Road, was incredible, but still left a lot of questions unanswered. Not just that, but Tony Gilroy, in a recent interview, talked about how all of the characters would only die in the gap between both seasons. Let's take a deeper look into some of the biggest questions we have about the show and what exactly Gilroy talked about. Starting with Season 1's finale. In the last episode of Season 1, we got to see a bunch of storylines progress, such as how Marva's holograms speech was the trigger that inspired the uprising that took place on Ferrix. Not just that, but we got to see Cassian make his way back home to save his old friend Bix from being tortured even more by the ISB, specifically Dedra Meero and Dr. Gorst. But one of the things fans were looking forward to the most was when Cassian snuck into Luthen's ship to finally tell him that he wanted to join the Alliance and the Rebellion. Despite many storylines coming to a satisfying end, the show still had many questions to answer that we'll have to wait to Season 2 to find out more about. But until then, let's take a look at them. Additionally, are Vel and Cinta still a thing? Among everything else, one of the things that we never got an answer to was the state of the relationship between Faye Marseille's Vel and Vereda Sathu's Cinta. While we already knew that the two were having some problems in the relationship, especially since one of them was much more committed to the Rebellion. On the one hand, we've got Cinta, who's fully invested in the Rebellion. All the while, Vel's motivation to fight against the Empire is kind of murky. The final episode didn't really do a lot to answer that question, especially since we see Vel watching Cinta while she's keeping an eye on Marva's home to check for signs about Cassian visiting. Not just that, but there was a lot of uneasiness in the room as Vel was standing behind Cinta with a super closed-off posture. She's still not happy with how much attention Cinta is giving her, who's utterly oblivious to the tension since she's a little too focused on doing what she needs to for the Rebellion. Will the two have to overcome a lot to fix their relationship, or are they going to go their separate ways? Season 2 will probably address what happens between the two, and we're probably going to find out whether they have a future with each other. Next up, will Mon Mothma get pinched on Coruscant? Another storyline that we'll have to wait until Season 2 to get some answers to is the one around Mon Mothma and her efforts at secretly funding the rebellion on Coruscant. Over the last few episodes, she's starting to feel the consequences of her embezzling as faults began to show up in her ledgers. Though we do see her cleverly get out of the situation by blaming her husband's gambling problems as the reason her money was missing in front of her driver, whom she already knew was a spy for the Empire. While it may be the best solution at the time, it doesn't give us any answers regarding who she can trust and who's looking for a chance to throw her under the bus. For all we know, it could turn out to be her husband, Perrin, or even her daughter, Leda, who might be more than a teenager full of angst. It could also be one of her business associates, someone from her political dealings, such as Tay Kolma, or even the shady banker Davo Skulden. Skulden would obviously benefit the most from selling her out. Additionally, how does Cyril figure in, and is Meero's future jeopardized? The character arc of Cyril Karn took quite an interesting twist in the final episode, as well as coming out of nowhere dressed up as a local from Ferrix to pop in and save a super vulnerable Dedra Meero from an angry mob that got a hold of her. Where did he even come from? What does his showing up mean for the relationship between the two ISB employees? Is the character just expressing how loyal he is along with his ambition to the Empire, or does he just have a weird obsession with Meero? But if there's anything that we do know for sure, it's that the Empire isn't going to take failure lightly. Keeping this in mind, what will happen to Meero after they discover that her attempts to capture both Axis and Cassian went terribly wrong, and both escape under the Empire's nose? Earlier in the show, we saw Cyril being punished for failing a mission that was far less significant. But is Meero's punishment going to be much harsher since she lost control of her mission? Or is she going to keep her position and only be motivated to go down on the rebellion even harder? Not just that, but are the people on Ferrix going to face even harsher treatment now? Similarly, what happened to Kino Loy on Narkina 5 and Cassian's sister? The last time we got to see Kino Loy was when he was right by Cassian as the two were leading an escape attempt from the Draconian Narkina 5. As they made their way to the bay doors with freedom just a leap away, we found out that Kino had to be left behind since he didn't know how to swim. What happened to him and the other inmates who couldn't make their way out? Was the Empire able to get control of the labor prison again and put up even harsher rules? On the other hand, we really haven't heard a lot about the long-lost sister of Cassian ever since he last talked about her to Marva back on Ferrix. While Marva told him to stop his search, she never really told him why. Did she already know that she was dead? Why else would she tell him to stop his search for her? Lastly, what is Luthen Rael's real past and history? We also didn't really get much of an explanation or backstory about Luthen, his tricked-out ship, the super valuable crystal that he gave Cassian, and the real reason why he wants to see the Empire fall. All of us would love to know more about where exactly his incredibly designed Fonder Hall craft came from and the battles it's been in. Why exactly is that crystal so important? Did it once belong to someone who was essential to the character? We were first introduced to the character as an ominous person who dealt with stolen parts. Still, instead, he turned out to be the leader of the Rebel Alliance, who has been undercover as an art dealer on Coruscant. Tony Gilroy reveals no one dies between Andor Season 1 and Season 2. Coming up in Season 2, when the show finally returns for its second and final season, a whole year would have passed by since Diego Luna's Cassian Andor would have told Stellan Skarsgård's Luthen Rael that he wanted to fully commit to the rebellion. During an interview that took place before the final episode of Season 1 came out, the show's creator, Tony Gilroy, told Steven Weintraub over at Collider that a lot of things would have happened in the time between the two seasons. Admittedly, a year isn't that long of a period, especially between a slow burn kind of rebellion, but a year could also be a matter of life and death for many of the characters that came out of the riot at Ferrix safe and sound. Luckily, the show's creator made sure to tell us all that all the characters that made it out alive will still be there when the next season drops sometime in 2024. During the interview, he also answered some more questions. Whether we would get to see Skarsgård's character come back in Season 2. To that, he replied that no one's going to die in the gap, and even if they're alive, he can't promise how long they'll live after going to the other side. But all the characters are aware of that. Moving on, if they lived in the show, they're alive. But no, if they survived until the end of Season 1, they're alive. Characters like Cassian, Genevieve O'Reilly's Mon Mothma, Duncan Powell's Melshi, and Forrest Whitaker's Saw Gerrera are returning for the second season, especially since their roles in Rogue One are some of the most important ones. But it's still relieving to find out that we're going to see more of Vereda Sethiu, Denny Scow, Adria Arjona, Kyle Solar, Faye Marseille, Joplin Siptane, and Elizabeth Dulau. While such characters probably will not see Cassian go on till his imminent death over at Scarif, at least we get to explore more about them along the way. We also got to find out that when shooting for the second season started, Kyle Solar was one of the first people in front of the camera. With a considerable time jump coming up, we're super interested to see how his actions from the finale led to him getting a position in the ISB alongside Deidre Miro. Finally, what we know about Andor Season 2. While we don't know much about the plot of the upcoming season, the show's creator mentioned earlier that the rebellion is going to head over to Yavin. While the first season only covered a small portion of the time in the life of Cassian Andor, other than his 30-day incarceration in Narkina 5, the show's second season will be much faster paced and full of action. The upcoming season will also be divided into blocks of 3 episodes each for the remaining years of Cassian's story. It will be written and directed by mostly the same people, but some new faces will join the production team, such as Ariel Kleiman, Janice Metz, and Alonso Ruiz Palacios, who are going to be directing scripts that are written by Dan Gilroy and Bo Welleman, along with another newcomer, Tom Bissell. Season 2 started filming earlier in December 2022, and we expect that to continue until August 2023, but the show's entire first season is now available on Disney+, so people can rewatch it or catch up to the Star Wars lore anytime. That's a wrap for this video. What are your thoughts on the show? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.